Hello and welcome to lesson 3 of week 3. In this lesson, we are going to look at objects in JavaScript. My name is Mildred. An object is a collection of key value pairs, and we have properties and methods. When we talk about the keys, they are strings or symbols, and the value can be of any data type, either the number, string, array function, another object, and so on. Let's say we want to talk about a person and we want to write several things about the person: the name, the age, whether the person is a student or a staff of a school, and then maybe we have a function within that object. Let's say let person and let person equal to. So we declare an object using a pair of curly braces like this. Then we have the key name with the value. So the value is going to keep to the rules of the data type of the value. So this is a string, and so we write Alice. We want to have another item or element of this object. We have age, and the value here is going to be a number, so we'll just leave it unquoted. Now you have to put a comma to separate each name value pair that you have in this object. So let's say we want to have like a student, and then we want to say true. This is a boolean, so I'm trying to illustrate with different data type in one object definition, and we want to put a function within it. Let's say function greet, right? So say greet will be a function, and this function does not take any arguments. Let's just return hello and the name of the person plus this dot name. Now what does this mean? When we say this, it refers to the object itself. So anytime you see this, it refers to the object itself, right? And so we can put a semicolon here, and let's log this to the console.log, and we want to say person.greet, and then we want this, so person.greet. So what we want to do here is I'm going to put this with a lowercase. So what we are doing here is we create an object called person. This object that we're creating is just a variable that stores several values, just like we will see later on when we look at arrays. If you're coming from Python, you'll see that this is just the same way we create a dictionary, but you have name value pairs here where the name is not quoted and the value keeps to the rules of the data type. You can put anything within an object definition. You can put properties, you can put methods. So we try to put the value of this greet to be a function. I want the function to return the hello, the name of the person in this object. So we use this dot name, so let's say the name in this particular object. Okay, and when you want to call a method within an object, you put the name of the variable that holds the object dot the name of the method, and you have to put a pair of parentheses. And when we come to our console, we'll see that it says hello Alice. All right, and we change the name of the person to Mildred, and we come here and we refresh. We have hello Mildred. So this is how an object is created in summary. So always remember that the name is not quoted, and the value can be any kind of value. It can be another object, it can be an array, it can be anything you want there. So we've seen one way of creating an object. So we have another way, which is by using the object constructor. For instance, we want to say let's say let car equal to new object. I won't always advise you to use the constructor. Just better to just keep the literal, which is always the most common. And then you now start appending values to it and say let's say car.brand to put the properties in it. So you use dot to name a new property. So the name of the variable dot brand to put a brand, and let's say this brand is Toyota. And then we have car.model. We have a model for this, let's say Camry, and then let's have car.here also, let's say 2020, and we'll have console.log car. And so we'll have this printed out just like an object literal when we come to the console to see brand, the model, the year. A constructor function is, I'm going to comment this out for now. A constructor function is another kind of function that we create like this. We have a function, then we want to give a name to the function. By convention, we start with an uppercase letter. So let's say function person like this. This person is going to have some properties, name and age, right? So when we have this in a pair of curly braces, we are going to define the values for this. So when we use this, we just mean this function itself, the object. So this dot name is equal to name, and this dot age is equal to age. Okay, so this is how you always define a constructor function. Always have a function, the name of the function, in a pair of parentheses. You put your properties, and then you define the properties here. You always use the this statement so that whatever the user supplies as an argument is going to be the value that will be the name of the person and the age of the person. All right, let's say for instance, let's P1, so we're defining person 1. Now, why is this more important than what we did previously? This variable we created, we can only put things about one person. It's fixed, we can't use it. So when we define or we create our software and we need to use this function to process a lot of scripts coming from the front end, or a lot of inputs that's entered into the front end, we don't want to always have to write this for each person because we do not know in advance the values that will be filled in. So we want to create a constructor function like this, and then after this function is created, we can create values, or we call them objects, from this constructor function. So we'll say let P1 equal to new, so we'll create an object of this function, new person. Okay, now we'll supply the values. So instead of name here, we can now put Alice. Instead of age there, we can now put 25. So we can continue to create new persons from this. P2 is equal to new person. So every time we use the new keyword to create an object out of this function. So now new person, we have, let's say John, and John is 30. So let's do console.log p1.name p2.name, and then we'll see what it prints out. We'll print Alice and John to the console. So you need to go over this over and over again. It can get a little confusing. This is like we are using the constructor function. Using ES6, we define a class, and we define a class person, and then in a pair of curly braces we now define the constructor, written constructor like this, and then we put the name and the age, and then we want to define what this name and age means. So we say this dot name is equal to the name that the user supplies, this dot age is equal to age that the user supplies. And now when we want to do this, we still use the new keyword to create an object of this class. So we can say, let's say this is now Bob and this is now Jane. Okay, let's say Bob is 27, Jane is 22, and then we'll get their name. Let's go to our page and let us see in the console. So we've seen how we can create an object, we've seen how we can do constructor function, we have seen how we can use the class from ES6, and now let's look at how we can access the properties of an object. And we use dot notation sometimes. So now we have, let me uncomment this and let's try to use this. So we have this class person, the name is Mildred, age 25, is student true. We have this function here. We say we log this to the console. Great. I want to delete this. We want to see how we access the properties of an object. These are called properties, whatever is inside the curly brace. And I want to get the name of the person. So let me say console.log person. This is using the dot notation, .age, that's the name of the property. Okay. Now when you are putting the property name, you don't put a pair of parentheses except you are calling a function. Okay, so we'll call it method within this, and so we do this. So we can also say we want to add new properties to this, right? So we want to add a new property, city. So we'll say person.city dot notation, and we'll put a value for the city, and this will add it. Let's say New York, and then we want to say console.log. Let's just log the person in the console, and then when we check our console, we'll see hello Mildred 25 person. Now this one that printed person there here is when we said it should log person, and we quoted it, but we have a variable named person, so we put person here, and so it will log the person. So you see this error I made. I want you to look at it carefully so that you will know when to quote is when it's a string. When it's a variable that is already declared, you're going to use just a variable name that is not quoted. So you can see the value printed out there. All right. We can also use the bracket notation, like when we say person.age, instead of .age you can put a pair of square brackets like this, and it will still print out what we have. So let me remove all of this and leave just the age, and when we come here and we refresh, we'll see age is not defined. And age is not defined because we have age here, but we are supposed to quote it. Okay, so you take note of what I'm doing. If I want a value, I put it there, but when I'm using the square brackets, now I did this deliberately for you to understand. You have to quote anything in the square brackets notation, and then you will get the age of the person. Okay, whenever you want to modify something, let's say we already have the age, so we can say here person.age, let's say person.age, and just change the value let's say it's 25, we want to make it 28. All right, and when we print out, now we'll have 28 because we modified the age. The same way that you can delete a property from it. So let's say we want to delete is student, so we'll say delete like this, person dot is student, like that. Okay, and when you say person dot is student, you are going to get there, so undefined. All right, so we have seen how we can create a method and object. Let's say you can have something, you have greet here. Let's say this is something different. Let's say we're creating an object called calculator, for instance. So let's say let calculator be equal to, and then now we can create method within this. So we'll say add, and now this is going to be a function that takes two parameters, let's say a and b, and then in the pair of curly brace again, we want to return a plus b. Now this is going to be called like this. So console.log, now the name of this object is called calculator. So say calculator dot add, and we want to add 5, 3, for instance. So we are passing in the argument for a and b here, and this should return 8 in the console when we refresh there. So you see how we write a method within it and how we call the method that takes arguments. There are built-in object methods that we can look at. Let's say we want to have the keys, for instance. So you can say let's go back to our person object. Okay, so we have the person object and we want to get all the names of the property, like all of these keys, we want to get their names. We'll do console.log person.keys. So console.log keys person. All right, so we'll have the object person, so we'll do the keys person, and so this will give us keys not defined. So why doesn't this work? We need to use object.keys, object.keys, and then person, and then when we refresh this time, it gives us all the keys of the person object. All right, so it gives us the number of elements in it and all of the keys that we have. All right, so you always have to do object dot. If you want to get the values, you can say object dot values like this, and then when we refresh, we'll get all of the values. If you want to get the key value pairs, you'll say object dot entries like this, and when I refresh, that is what we will get, the key and value. Okay, and then we have the list of key value pairs for it. It gives us the length and prototype array. So there are other inbuilt methods like the assign, the freeze, the seal. We use assign to copy properties, we use freeze to make objects immutable, and then we use the seal to allow changes to existing properties, but not like adding or removing, but just allow like updates. So when we looked at the loops in the first lesson, we can loop through these properties using the for in loop. We want to iterate over each item of this, so we can say for, and then we'll say let's use key, any variable you want. Let key in the name of the object, which is person, and we want to do something, which is we want to log into the console. Let's log the key and let's log all the keys, right? So we want to get all the keys in the person, so we'll say key, and we concatenate two strings using the plus sign. So we'll say plus and then plus person, so we can put person and here key, because we have used key as the iterator that loops through. So when we come to the console, it's going to print each of the key here. So we have name Mildred, age 25 is true, so it loops through and prints every item. So it is even easier or cleaner to use a different approach than this if we use the for each. So we do that like this. Instead of writing this like this, we can say, and let's use a neater method to do this. So we can say object dot keys person dot for each. So we use the arrow notation. Then in a pair of curly brace, we want to have our console.log, and we want to log the key plus, let's put a colon there, plus the value of the item, like that. So I think this is the neater way we'll say for the loop. Instead of using for in, we use object.keys.for each like this. If you get confused, you just use the other syntax we use and see it refresh, and we'll have the same thing printed out here in the console. So you can have nested objects where you have an object holding another object within it. You can also have an object holding a list or several types, an array or dates within them. As we go to advanced course, you will see that in our examples. You can also refer to your lesson resource to see various examples about this. So we have said that inside an object, when we use this, we're referring to the object itself. We have something we call JavaScript object notation, which we use to convert objects to JSON. And we use this for API development. You can refer to your lesson resource to see an example, but we're going to look at it as we go deeper. This is where we end this lesson. Thank you and see you next week.